Good evening, my name is Dakira Andrews Graham, and I am a junior computer science major at Norfolk State University, and I'll be presenting From School to the Prison Pipeline. For many, going to school has literally become figuratively synonymous with going to jail. Today, I'll be discussing what the pipeline is, how zero tolerance plays into effect, how the media plays a huge role, special education, and how we can end the pipeline. So what is School to the Prison Pipeline? School to the Prison Pipeline is a set of policies and guidelines that has led students out of the classroom and towards the criminal justice system. Policies such as zero tolerance, broken window policy, and 3 strikes, you're out has increased the rate of suspension and expulsion. Zero tolerance came into effect in the 1990s when school shootings were occurring and the fear of crime started to rise. The goal was to promote stricter behavior that went beyond the federal law. So this meant that zero tolerance would increase security, and act that students be expelled for any minor offenses, for example, talking back to a teacher, disruptive behavior, etc. The applied behavior analysis concluded that zero policy not only simplifies the difference between what is classified as serious crime, but also doesn't classify who is considered a deliberate troublemaker and who actually has a disability. Daniel Lawson, Cherry Hodson, and Michael Keith II wrote an article titled The Civil Rights Project, where they stated minorities are at a greater impact of the suspension because of the enactment of zero tolerance. Black students receive a vastly disproportionate amount of discipline and punishment than any other race in the United States. The United States Department of Education Office for Civil Rights noted 4.6% students were suspended compared to 16.4% of white students in the same year of 2017. I believe the goal of zero tolerance was to ensure safety in the school system, yet it has increased the rate of student dropout, increased the rate of suspension and expulsion, and has decreased the chances of students receiving a fair opportunity. Samuel Walker and Casey Spohn wrote a book titled The Color of Justice, Race, Ethnicity, and Crime in America. In the book, they discuss how the media portrays a huge role in society. They discuss how when people hear or see stories about robberies or murders, that it is assumed that the crime is violent, the victim is typically white, and the offender is typically African American. Robert E. Edmond and Andrew Rajicki wrote in their article, The Black Image in the White Mind, that black people will be seen on TV in a negative way 4 times more likely than a white person in a mugshot. And the media also presents an image that blacks are criminals and illustrated to be dressed down or raggedy looking than white criminals. I believe TV is an illusion of false representation of crime, and these assumptions of black people are false. Why does the media only illustrate black people as thugs? The definition of a thug is someone who is a criminal. The definition of a criminal is someone who commits a crime. So therefore, aren't we all thugs? Aren't we all criminals? Never in my life of living have I ever heard Charles Manson, Ted Bundy be called a thug. So why is the word only associated with African Americans? The media indicates bias, and the way media shows black representation is the way teachers, police, and the community not only view black people, but how they act towards them. Special education is also affecting the pipeline. Dr. Umar Johnson did a study on special education. His first finding was that School to the Prison Pipeline fails to differentiate the difference between children who have a skill deficit and who actually have a learning disability. And the reason so many people are sent to special education is because it is an equal economic stimulus package for the school system. Johnson believes that special education became a program to remove black kids out of the classroom legally. He believes that African American parents of special education are often misguided or overeducated to what special education really is. His second finding was that ADHD is often diagnosed not because the student has the problem, but because the parent or the teacher has the problem. These students are often on medication because the adult did not want to put up with the child. Furthermore, these medicines used to treat ADHD usually are the same symptoms that are supposed to be prevented. Lastly, Johnson believes that Wall Street has produced over $30 billion exclusively off of ADHD. This is because ADHD has become such a general criteria that is now easily to be diagnosed, which means it's easier to prescribe medication. If you ask me, ADHD is becoming the next genocide. Dr. Umar Johnson believes special education has become a hustle and welfare check for lazy school districts who do not want to educate black students. Last year, the Center of Public Integrity conducted a research that Virginia is at a 3 times national average for referrals of students to law enforcement than any other state. They also showed that students with disabilities of color get referred more than any other race. The Legal Aid Justice Center claims that Richmond has one of the highest suspension and expulsion rates. Furthermore, Richmond City Schools were ranked 9th lowest for on-time graduation, and the Virginia School Division ranked 1st for high school dropout. The government of Richmond has now decided to look at the pipeline from a classroom point of view instead of a courtroom point of view. So how do we end the pipeline, besides the obvious of keeping students in classroom? I believe the first thing we must do is create relationships. If teachers build a memorable and appropriate relationship with students, then students will respect the teacher and they will try harder in school. The number one factor that determines whether a student is successful or not in the classroom is simply based off the fact of how much the teacher believes in the student. It has nothing to do about whether the student comes from a 2-parent household, how much the parent makes, socioeconomic, any of that. It's literally just based off of how much the teacher believes that the student can succeed or not. Secondly, I believe we need relevance. The lessons that teachers teach in class must be relevant to the students' lives and the things that they are going through. Lastly, I believe we need more black teachers, males to be in effect. Majority of teachers are white and females at that, so most white females don't know how to handle the typical black person or the typical black boy. In conclusion, students' freedom to an education is being stripped from their mind from a system that's operated against students of color and disabilities than it is for them. Racism in the pipeline has become unbearable, and racism in the pipeline has become disproportionately unbearable. The inequity and injustice that students of color and with disabilities have faced is leading them down a path that is almost unbearable for them to come back from. For some of these students, they've been told their whole life that their academic performance and being successful in a normal school system would never be good enough. Sally Polinsky proposed a question on her blog. Why should these students strive for more than a life of crime? For some of these students, the answer will be that good grades doesn't make the world go round. Perhaps it's time for society to undergo a mental shift and recognize the imminent needs for our youth in effort to save them from the pipeline. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to end the pipeline and save our students. Thank you.